The Taiwan question is at the core of China's core interests. And the One China principle has long become a universally recognized norm governing international relations. But what we are seeing now is that the DPP authorities in Taiwan are pursuing separation in an incremental way. They are bent on erasing the Chinese identity of Taiwan and severing social, historical, and cultural links across the Taiwan Strait. Those separatists recently made fanatical statements that show their betrayal of the Chinese nation and their ancestors. They will be nailed to the pillar of shame in history. At the same time, some external interfering forces keep hollowing out the One China principle with a salami slicing strategy. They have cooked up Taiwan-related legislations and continued to sell arms to Taiwan and have illegal official contacts with it. In fact, what they are doing is to embolden Taiwan independence separatists in an attempt to contain China with Taiwan. These malicious intentions are dragging Taiwan into a dangerous situation. China's handling of Taiwan-related issues in accordance with its laws is entirely an internal affair of China, which brooks no foreign interference. China stays committed to peaceful reunification. However, this prospect is increasingly being eroded by separatists for Taiwan independence and foreign forces. The danger of national division is still there. The Chinese People's Liberation Army will remain a strong force for upholding national reunification. We will take resolute actions to curb Taiwan independence and make sure such a plot never succeeds. Anyone who dares to separate Taiwan from China will only end up in self-destruction.
Official, NVIDIA has become the third stock ever to reach $3 trillion in market cap. And it happens as NVIDIA and the other big tech names rally today on the back of excitement over its AI business. Of course, NVIDIA really the poster child for all this AI excitement because it makes the chips that power all that AI software. So joining us now is Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde, who has been, of course, keeping track of all these moves. And the question here for NVIDIA is whether fundamentally, these gains are justified.
That is the key question. And for most analysts out there, they'd say yes. If you look at the ultimate amount are still buyers on the rating of the stock, the valuation in many ways is phenomenal from a $3 trillion perspective. But the PE ratios, they ain't that crazy. Because why? Revenue is growing at such a pace. Just take their previous quarter numbers. When you've got revenue climbing at 200%, no wonder the share price is already climbing 200%. We're meant to be anticipating these sorts of gains. It's meant to be a future indication of value. And ultimately, in the moment, many feel that, yes, it's an equivalent to an Apple right now in terms of market cap. It should be.
Actually, as NVIDIA continues to move higher, it is now overtaken Apple. Of course, this is a parlor game. We have to wait till we get to the actual closing bell for this to be official here. But it really does sort of show how much has changed. Because remember, Apple was the big growth stock a few years ago. And now some people would say it's just basically just a cash generating dividend stock.
Value remains value.
Oh, sorry, value, excuse me. But NVIDIA is the growth stock, right? Now, whether whether they actually make good on all those growth expectations, that remains to be seen over the long term. But at least for right now, this is where it's at. Is there anything else out there?
Well, in terms of comparable, where else you could, well, HPE today was showing that AI can bathe glory on some of the other infrastructure players. So if you want to be buying into future server demand, well, HPE see an 11% increase in its stock today and a new record high, but it is well off the market cap of an NVIDIA. Now, remember, come Monday, we get a stock split.
Yeah.
This has got so expensive. Maybe some of that valuation has been picking up because we anticipate retail investors are going to getting more into the stock.
Well, that's what I'm curious whether that's probably driving this as well. And what does that mean? That Monday's going to be a dud? Is all this going to be priced in by the time we get there?
Isn't that what the market's meant to do?
Taiwan 帮助我们实现了一个愿景。在这条漫长的路上，无数的伙伴支持着我们，从加速运算、电脑绘图、科学研究到人工智慧的高峰，每一个晶片，每一台电脑，都描写着你们辛勤工作和追求完美的故事。台湾是无名的英雄，却是世界的支柱。一起，我们推动了产业的复兴，辛勤的耕耘，让我们能够踏入崭新运算的领域。其中，我们制作的电脑会转化成新型的工厂，制造珍贵无比的人工智慧。亲爱的伙伴们，你们是 AI 产业革新的后盾。无论面对多大的风浪，你始终稳如磐石。科技的卓越、勤奋与齐心合力的精神，是你的超能力。没有你，我们的愿景只是一个无法实现的梦想。与你同行，我们勇往直前，创造智慧与便利的生活，对抗疾病和自然灾害，让我们的世界变得更美好。谢谢你，台湾。让我们继续为这段 AI 创新之旅，打造一个成功和繁荣的产业。
The global competition to secure access to semiconductors is perhaps the most vital competition of all the battles for resources on the planet. It affects national security, civilian economies like no other single item. Most chips are produced overseas, and to lower American dependence on foreign producers, Congress passed the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act in 2022. President Biden recently announced Intel would receive $8.5 billion provided by the legislation. Intel will use the funds to build and improve plants in Oregon, Arizona, New Mexico, and Ohio. Some 30,000 U.S. jobs will be created in the process. For more on the grant and the CHIPS Act, we are joined by Chris Miller. He's the author of Chip War, the fight for the world's most critical technology. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with this $8.5 billion for Intel. Why is that important specifically, and what does it tell us about the implementation of this big piece of legislation, the CHIPS Act?
Well, this is the first big multi-billion-dollar grant that is being issued as part of the CHIPS Act. For Intel, it's an important vote of confidence in their large-scale capital expenditure program as they build and upgrade plants across the country, and as they try to shift their business so it's fit for purpose in an age of AI chips playing absolutely a central role in the U.S. economy. And for the CHIPS Act as a whole, it's the first of what's going to be a series of multi-billion-dollar grants to different big chip makers, which is at the center of the U.S. strategy to revitalize its own chip-making industry.
And I want to get to artificial intelligence in a moment, but one of the great things you write about in Chip War is the changing fortunes of Intel as a chip producer. The CHIPS Act is about this larger race, mostly with China. What's the state of that race right now for microprocessors, and where is China and where is the U.S. in that race?
Well, the U.S. still has a very strong position, but in the specific sphere of chip manufacturing, which is just one of many difficult parts of the process to make an advanced chip, the U.S. has indeed fallen behind over the past couple of years. And Intel is one of several companies that is trying to help the U.S. catch up, not to China, but actually to Taiwan, which is the world's leading chip maker. But that matters because there's more concern than ever about the security situation in East Asia, where today most of the world's advanced chips are made.
And Chris, the U.S. obviously wants to protect Taiwan for that very reason you mentioned. Also, the U.S., the Biden administration, has been trying to throttle China's access to the component parts, the component processes to make these advanced chips. How's that going? We've seen leakiness in things like Russia sanctions, China sanctions. How have the efforts to keep China from this technology, how have they been working?
Well, I think every sanctions regime is leaky, and this one is no exception. But even with the leaks, what you find is that Chinese firms still wish they had more access to foreign-produced chips, above all American-designed chips that are used for artificial intelligence purposes, because these chips are absolutely critical for training the most advanced AI systems. And so right now, Chinese firms do face a disadvantage, and the entire Chinese AI ecosystem faces a disadvantage because they can't access these most advanced chips at the scale they would like to.
And Chris, help us understand the needs of artificial intelligence. Is it that they need a tremendous amount of just computing power in a single chip, or is it that they need lots and lots of chips, or are there different parts of AI that require different kinds of chips and it's more complicated than that?
Well, there are many different applications of AI, but the key trend over the past several years have been what AI experts call the scaling laws. That means the bigger the system you train, the more effective it is. And if you want to train a bigger AI system, you need more and more computing power, which means large numbers of ultra high-end chips. And so if you look at what companies like Microsoft or OpenAI or Google are doing, they're acquiring some of the world's most advanced chips in vast quantities to use them to run huge amounts of data through their AI systems. And this has been the key factor that's allowed AI to progress so rapidly in recent years.
And so very briefly, we're in an election year. What ideas, thoughts should voters have in mind as they evaluate two presidential candidates? Or is there a question that candidates should have to answer with respect to this competition over microprocessors?
Well, I think actually what you've seen is that semiconductors have been a rare bipartisan issue in the U.S. The CHIPS and Sciences Act was passed with bipartisan support in both houses of Congress, and the export controls on China, which we mentioned, were also supported by both Democrats and Republicans. So I think this election has a lot at stake, but chip policy will probably be pretty similar, regardless of which party wins, either in Congress or the White House.
Chris.
And whatsoever you shall ask in my name, that will I do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you shall ask anything in my name, I will do it. If you love me, keep my commandments.